Hello, and welcome to the monthly Insight Care Partner Training. Today we will be talking about family dynamics and dementia. Our mission is to provide specialized care, support, and education for individuals in all stages of memory and cognitive impairment, their partners, and the community. Our vision, a community where those living with memory or cognitive impairment and their care partners can achieve the highest quality of life. We are a leader in dementia care in Northern Virginia. Insight is a nonprofit. We are happy to say we started 40 years ago this year. And our care, we bring specialized adult day programs for people in all stages of their dementia journey. We connect by building relationships and support care partners on their journey. And with creativity, dementia experts sharing their knowledge and resources because every journey is unique. Today, we have our guest, Rebecca Harrison, who has been a wonderful resource for our families, both providing personal counseling and providing these wonderful presentations and talking at our support groups. So without further ado, welcome.
So that's my goal today. So I'm assuming that if you're listening today, virtually, or you're present, that you may be either wanting to improve family relationships or being challenged by family relationships. So we're going to talk about the family relationships. And my focus is not to change your family dynamics. You can't come in today and say, I want to change my family dynamic. I want us to think about, as I do this presentation, I want you to think and bring in your head what your family system is. And what your family system is. And as we explain the system, I want you to apply that to your family. So there's an invitation to bring it into your head, like, what is my family? How is my family organized? What is my family system? And as I go over those components, then maybe you can identify how you function in your own family system. Communication is a challenge when someone in a family system. I'm going to cover that today. The shift in the family dynamics is due to the changing person with dementia changing their behaviors and their emotions, which really requires the whole family to adapt. When we need to really work to maintain the balance in the family system, dementia not only impacts, as I said earlier, everyone, the person, but everyone else in the system. And it can develop into a family crisis. And those are the folks that I see and I talk to most often are the ones in crisis. Now, dementia can enter a family system, and it can actually bring family members closer together. It can provide you with an intimate level of relationship that you've never had. I've had children tell me they're closer to their parents because of caregiving. So I'm not here to say that it's a negative experience for everyone. I'm here to talk to the point of, if it's good, is there ways we can improve it? If it's good, we want to know what we're doing well and keep on doing it. So we're here today to look at our role in this system as we're caring for someone with dementia. First is, what is a family? And everyone has a different, the definition of family is any combination of that you self-identify as a family. Doesn't have to be a biological family or a legal family. It can be what is called a kinship family, which is family that you've chosen because of relationships. Maybe you have gone through a life event together and you have made a cohesive group, and that becomes your family. So when I think about family, not all of us are born into a family. And so how do we create these families? And what group of people are we identifying today that is our family? So I want you to be aware that I'm not talking about the nuclear family, the biological family. This is the family that's currently supporting you and that you're a member of, or they may not be supporting you, and that's your family as well. So we want to talk about that. I want to introduce family theory as we're talking about family. And it's a little bit more textbook, but family theory is a way of understanding the interaction and the dynamic within a family. It looks how each member is affected and how it's and emphasizes the interconnectedness and rules within the family unit, and also the patterns in a family. So that's the premise which we're looking at today. So we want you to bring into awareness your family and how they are interacting, how each member is affecting each other, and be mindful of that as we talk. John Bradshaw was a leading person when I was going to school 100 years ago on family therapy. And he did this model, which talks about the family being immobile. And he says that when it's steady and the family is the family's going very calmly. Now, it may not be a family that is fully functioning. You may have a lot of crisis in that family, but they found stability somehow. They've adapted to whatever the family system is. And so it maintains stability. It has stability. And then when you enter a crisis into that, the mobile goes around and around like this. So that's what, and we're looking at that. We want to explore how the individual does with that change in the family system and how the whole family reacts to it. Now, we have happy families, which have certain characteristics. They are warm, they're caring, they're positive attention, they're very cohesive. They have really open communication styles. There's no secrets. They manage conflict. They set clear expectations with each other, and they set limits with each other. They stick together. And this stable system you're able in that system to express your preferences and your differences. So it's a really cohesive unit. So it's going like this. And when dementia enters that family, you have less of this because they're able to communicate what they're needing. But now, sadly, not all of us have that family to rely on when a crisis happens. And if we have a family that has been a little bit not as functional, then we can oftentimes, the family system has harmful behaviors, ineffective behavior, poor interaction, ineffective communication management, lack of boundaries, a lack of empathy, and at times there can be hostility and aggression in the family unit. So unhealthy family relationships have just really ineffective communication patterns. We're not talking to each other in a way that is healthy, that we're avoiding conflict. We have family members that stay out of the family unit and let someone else do the primary care. We may have just intense misunderstandings on the severity of the illness, of the diagnosis of dementia. So there's many contributing factors to a family that is not in just calm and just doing, but they're doing this. They're just really out. We really need to understand that we need to accept our family as they are and not who we wish they be. So we don't like to come from a family like, I don't know, Ozzy and Harriet, or, some really happy family, that Brady Bunch. But, that doesn't happen to all of us. So let's see what family we have, and let's see what we have to work with. There are 4 components to family dynamics, and it sounds a little textbooky, but I want you to think about this as you're listening today. So the 4 components are adaptability to change. So how does your family handle crisis? How do they handle change? Like a move across the United States or a move next door. How did they handle someone else's illness in the family? Sometimes it goes really smoothly, and other times the families just don't adapt that well. They get stuck, and they want things to remain the same. So they're not really trying to adapt. So we really want to see if we can. Was the family rigid? Are they not flexible? Has your family been flexible, and they're not flexible now? So what might be causing that? Have they always been rigid? They don't move. They don't do anything different. They don't adapt to new changes. They have difficulty when the child moves out of the house to go and marry. So we want to keep in mind that some family patterns are not very adaptive. And if that's your family, I want you to bring that to your front of your thinking and say, okay, I can identify that in my family. They're not that adaptive. So when I'm interacting with them, I want to recognize that my family's not that adaptable. So then we're going to look at the hierarchy, the structure of your family. So within a family, certain members have more power than other family members. There is the power. There's always a power person in every system. So I'm saying that the family, as I'm presenting it today, is a system. So these are the four components of the family system. So every system has a power point. And so in your family, whether it's a kinship family, a step family, or a biological intact family, that is someone has been the power person, has the hierarchy. So what's your hierarchy? Because then if you know what the hierarchy is, you can figure out what you need to do. Family boundaries. The boundaries in the family are really important. You're reflecting on your family today. I want you to reflect on what were your family boundaries. Did they invite people in to the family space? Did they invite the outside in? Did they invite? Was there a lot of boundaries within just the family members? You wouldn't talk, you wouldn't invite somebody to do something for you. That's your boundary. I see this oftentimes with caregivers wanting to bring in assistance into the home. So if you've got a family member whose boundaries have been rigid and not flexible, and you're trying to get a caregiver to come in, that person's probably going to say, I don't want a stranger in my home. I don't want them here. So you're going up against that established boundary. It's not just now they don't want anybody in their home. It's been going on a while. So you're looking at that, like mom, dad, sister, brother, husband, wife. They've never wanted strangers in the house. They've only wanted us. And so you want to pay attention to that when you're looking at what's happening in your family, if there is family conflict. You also, communication. And I can't touch enough on communication, and I'm going to address this a bit more, of communication. But for this point, for the components, families have some families have open, honest communication. Others, they struggle with avoidance. They struggle with conflict, misunderstanding. And the one that I see oftentimes in my practice is secrecy. There's a secret about how advanced someone is with dementia. There's a secret in how they're going to handle their finances. There's secret keeping in the primary family. And that doesn't bring the family together as a unit. That continues to separate family members. So you're not working as a system when that's happening. You're working almost in an individualized way. So when we think of family, we think of an intact unit, a system that's functioning and working together. Family roles, the role that you have in your family. Now, I know that many of you have heard about these family roles that it really does, we adopt them due to the family dynamics and the interactions that we give. We know that oftentimes the caregiver is female, it's gender specific. I'm not saying that we don't have male caregivers, but I think statistically women tend to be the primary caregivers. And so that would be the role that you may have in your family, that you are the caregiver because you're a woman and you know how to do these things. And we generally do. But so being aware of the different roles in the family, including the one you play. Now, this is where I want you to really get honest with yourself and think about what is your role in the family. Now, you can reflect this on a new established kinship family. You can think of this in your family of origin. But most of us come into relationships with our family of origin adaptive behaviors. We don't leave. Just because I leave Kansas doesn't mean I leave Kansas. I'm bringing those experiences that formed me with me into any new relationship that I get. So I may have had a role in my family that I'm enacting now. And so I want to explore some of those roles in the family. So first one is the peacemaker. Now, I'm not sure how many of you can identify with this one, but I tend to see this one often. In the family, the peacemaker is the mediator. That's the person that resolves conflict. They maintain harmony in the system. They're the one that mom or dad calls to come and take care of things. And they've been identified
as the person that can be relied. Now, what happens though oftentimes is that person may sacrifice so many life opportunities to be the person that is the mediator or the peacemaker. So you have someone that may feel that they're sacrificing in order to care for the family. And oftentimes that can have a double edge. It feels great to be the mediator and have the power in the family, but it also can become a burden because then you're taxed with all the heavy lifting. So we want to see, are you the mediator in the family? And is some of the difficulty you're struggling with because you are sacrificing too much? We want to look at, I think I skipped one here.
Well, she's looking for her page. If anyone has questions, please put them in the Q&A. We're not going to be turning on the microphone, and then I will address them at the end and we'll ask for questions. Thank you.
And then we have the scapegoat. Now that scapegoat, it could be even referred to as black sheep. That scapegoat is the person who always gets blamed in a family system. If something happens, then it's your fault, Jane. Or if something happens, well, Billy's always acting out. Mom's always worried. I'm sure the reason she's not well right now isn't because she has dementia. It's because Billy isn't behaving well. The whole problem goes toward Billy. So we want to really, are you that person? Be the person that gets blamed and scapegoated for any family, any changes in the family system. And the other one that I see oftentimes, because these are the folks that appear and asking for help, is the parentified child. Now, that is the person in the family unit that most often gets identified very early on. Like if there's been a death in the family and one parent has died, then that other parent may rely on the child to do babysitting, caring for older siblings, caring for a grandmother living in the home. So that may be the person that's been given adult responsibilities very early on, way past their developmental age. And you may have had experiences like that. And we see that oftentimes in families where there's addiction, because the person with addiction can't actually perform the family duties. So a sibling or an uncle or an aunt or someone comes in and does that. So we want you to be aware of is that your role in the family? Because then what's the risk of that one? Is that you become over functioning. You are the parent in this relationship and you're over functioning for everyone. You won't let families do much of anything because you got it. And that's your identity. And boy, is it hard to let that go because you've had that ingrained that you are responsible. And it's really hard to give yourself permission to step back from that. So we want to look at that. Like, are you giving yourself permission not to do and be everything in this caregiving role? That you've been given, whether you chose it or not. We also have a clown. Now, some families have this person. They're so humorous. They make light of everything. They're just fun. They're the best Uncle Joe or Aunt Jane. So they're the happy person, and they just make humor, and it feels like they're minimizing the seriousness of the dementia. It's like, Dad just did this, haha, or my husband just did this, your dad just did this, but it's not bad. So they're just kind of making light of it. And though other family members may see the seriousness of it, that person just isn't able to be able to communicate other than in a humor or a clownship way. Then we have the rebel. And sometimes we have these in the family as well. The rebel is the one that comes in, acts out. They're the family drama. Every time Sally Joe comes to family, there's drama. She's upset, she's crying, or she doesn't like the way you did something, or he becomes angry, refuses to come. We have a drama king or queen. And those are the rebels. They are just going to act out. They act out emotionally, behaviorally. So they've always been causing family drama. Usually that's been done in the past as well. This might be, but if you're in the family system and this is a sibling, you kind of know that Sally Joe's the one that creates the drama. So you know that that's what she does in the family system, because we're all playing off each other to keep the system rolling. But if I know Sally Joe's the drama queen, then I can always make space for that in my family of origin until a crisis hits. And then when the crisis hits, then I want Sally Joe to take it less fun, be less funny, and be more reliable. And there we have it. We have a conflict of expectations and we lose the connection. So we want to do that. And of course, we can't leave out the lost child. Now that's the child or the family member, the uncle, the aunt, maybe the cousins that don't come around. They're the ones early in the process in the system have detached from the system. They're the ones that have moved across the United States or they come home only on holidays. So they're not, that's what they're doing. They just detach and avoid. They detach, avoid conflict. They'll show up if you ask them, but they're not that invested because that's where they found their safety in the original family was to step outside it because that's how they coped with whatever the family dynamic was. So they kind of go missing. They're the missing person. And of course, we have just one more, which is the golden boy or girl. Now that is the family member, and you may see it in just two siblings, that is golden. They can do nothing wrong. They are always the right thing. They know what to do. Mom and dad just adore them. They just walk on water. So that's your golden person. So you have these family roles that are in the family system, but we adapt to them until a crisis comes. And then those start bringing out, well, we need something else from someone else, and they're not able to, or not at that point able to give it to us. But first I want to do an example. I can sit up here and talk about this, but I want to give an example of a real time. I was very fortunate. I was able to travel to Australia recently to see a longtime friend I hadn't seen in years. And I was there, and she said, I have a friend. I'm going to make up names. I don't think anyone would know these people, but just for identity, these are all made up names and places. And she said, I have a friend, Karen, and her mother was recently diagnosed with dementia. And Karen is really struggling. She's dropped out of the book club. I think she's drinking. I don't know what's going on with her, but would it be okay if you would speak to her? Because we don't have resources like Insight and online support groups for dementia. We're just starting to move in that direction. So I said, sure, I'll be very happy, whatever I can do to speak with Karen. So Australians have a different language than Americans, which is really interesting. We all speak English, right? But instead of my friend saying, well, Rebecca, I've invited Karen to come over for a cup of tea or coffee, she says, I've invited Karen to pop over for a cup of tea. And then when it was time, she said, oh, Karen, thanks for popping over. And I'm thinking, we don't pop over in America. We drop by. But in the story with Karen, in listening to her story when she started talking about her mother, Karen has, as if you're listening to the roles, she was the parentified child. Her father died when she was early on. Mom worked. Karen became the caregiver of the brothers. She had an older brother, Clayton, a younger brother, Troy. And mom was the center. So they grew up with mom really being in control. And so Clayton could be the golden boy. He was mom's favorite. He looked like the deceased father. And Troy, well, he didn't really have a spot. So he just sort of moved to the other side of Australia. And he just came home when he had to. So they had this family system that worked as long as mom was in charge. But as mom got more advanced dementia, mom couldn't do it anymore. So now they're dealing with all the issues that they have to deal with as a family system. So you can imagine that system that was smooth because mom ran it with an iron hand now is completely in turmoil and chaos. And Karen is the person who's on the ground with mom trying to make the family come together. And now she's got all these issues that you have when you're trying to manage a crisis. So now that's my case study, and I'm going to bring it back in when I talk about the stages of the crisis, which I think we have on the slide. Stage one is actually the crisis itself. That's the dementia diagnosis. So that's the beginning stage of the crisis. So you get the diagnosis, family goes, oh gosh, now what are we going to do? Then the second stage is the system gets organized. Like with Karen's system, that once the diagnosis, progression, completely chaotic. It's the low point in the family system. It's not going well at all. And it becomes chaotic, and each member can feel helpless or anxious or vulnerable, or in Karen's case, extremely angry about what was happening to her. And it can just really, and she appeared to have them all. I mean, she was really sad. She felt really isolated from her family, from her siblings. They didn't have extended family siblings of the mom to come in and help. So it really was relying on the 3 children, and they were just completely not knowing how to navigate this without the center. So the family became in crisis. And I was reading online about family crisis, and I read a study that was conducted in 2018 on what throws families most often, the areas that throw the family in crisis when someone is diagnosed with dementia. And you are not going to be surprised by these categories. They appropriate boundaries for caregivers and setting boundaries on how you're caregiving. That's a big area of conflict among the families, and area of conflict for the caregiver is boundaries. How do I set boundaries? What do I do? Disapproving of family members' actions or attitudes. So there's disapproval. You're not taking care of dad the way I want you to take care of him. You just leave him on his own for 2 hours and go get groceries. I mean, that's not right. So there's this disapproval or attitude like, oh, he's not that bad. I don't know why you're making a big deal about this. So there's the disapproving. And then this disagreement about the nature and the seriousness of the person's condition. And that's one where we see some families can accept it and say, okay, we understand this diagnosis, and other people will deny it in the family system. So you do have the denial in the system. So it's understandable why this is one of the key parts of the conflicts that happen in a crisis when dementia is diagnosed in the family system. Disapproval of financial matters. It's amazing what money does to people. No one quite agrees about how to spend it, how to use it, where it comes from. So financial matters have become a real hot button. How are we going to afford the care? Are we going to sell the house now or later? Can we get care in, care out? Do they even need care? So financially, it can be really contentious. So I agree with all these study support, because I think all of us at some point may have experienced some of these. And disagreement over the type or quality of care. Now, maybe I may think that my mother would need home care, but my sister would not, and thinks that mom's just fine on her own, because after all, she came to visit her yesterday, and mom started talking about how she wanted to bake a cake. So, I mean, it's just so there's areas of disagreement that throws the family system, because there's no, so then that's why it's so important that we then, once we got this crisis, right, we got any of these factors that are creating crisis, we have to reorganize the system. So the reorganization of the system is the really important part, right? So the family needs to take the action. They need to,
You need to flip over.
yeah, they need family organization of the system. They need to take action. They need to identify the problem, but of course we know what that is. Then we got to take action. We got to make a plan of action. And then we want to establish a new system. Now that can be tricky too, because the new system needs to be different than the old system. And if I ask people to raise their hands in here, how many people really love change? We probably wouldn't get that many hands, because we want the things to remain the same. We want mom or dad or brother or sister or husband or wife to do what they always did. We don't want my husband Sam not to drive me to the doctor, because he's done that since retirement. So we don't want to give up what we know. But we have to adapt to a new system. So we have to be, back to the other slides and the other parts, is adaptable. So we really want to reorganize. So how do we do that? Well, we need to develop a realistic plan. Now, what do you mean by that? Well, we don't want to go for the worst case scenario that we need to place, or we need to do something immediately, but we don't want to do the best case scenario. Like, this is not going to be a problem because this isn't going to advance. So we want to make it realistic. We want to look at it reality wise. And then we want to seek information and understanding. And to give Insight a plug here, they're amazing giving insight and understanding and being an information source. So you want, in that realistic perspective, to make a plan, get as much information as you can, and then you want to get honest again about relationships. And now I work on feeling. And sometimes when my kids come home and I say, well, how do you feel now? Roll their eyes up and we're, oh my God, Mom, you're not talking about feelings again, are you? I'm like, yeah, we are. So we want to see what was the relationship with that person with dementia prior to the diagnosis, prior to the onset. So we really want to know, we want to take that into the dynamic as well, because if I've had a relationship with a spouse that wasn't that close prior to the dementia onset, then how can you expect me to be really loving now? Because this is a really challenging diagnosis. So I may not be coming into my caregiving role with a lot of affection. I may be coming into it with a real sense of obligation. And so if I'm making a realistic plan, let's be realistic about that. I may not be the caregiver that wants to stay and do all the personal care of my spouse. I may be the person that would like to spend, if my spouse is in residential, in a dementia specific residential program, I may be the one that wants to stay there and be there during the day, but I may be also the one that doesn't go there all the time. So we have to really be honest with ourselves and say, hey, what's realistic? What is it that I can do for this? We want to communicate really early in the process. Because we want to start this process the moment the diagnosis has happened. We don't want to wait to see what the outcome is going to be, because if you get a diagnosis, you don't know how it's going to progress. None of us know, but we really want to communicate, and that will avoid any future crisis. We want to make sure that we've talked about this. We may even talk it to death, but let's talk about it. Let's communicate about it. And if we got to have a really clear conversation, because if it's unclear, it can do more harm than good. You really have to be clear about what your thoughts are about this, what you personally see as how you would manage this, and be honest with yourself. And also remember that not everyone is on the same page as you are. Everybody comes to this acceptance at a different pace. I may have, if this were my parent, I may have siblings that aren't accepting of this. They still see the parent as fully functioning, even though they've been tested and they have a diagnosis. So we have to wait for people to catch up with us. We can't drag them along and try to make them where we are, but we have to have the patience. So we want to communicate that. We can't just be critical and say, well, you know what this is. And all through this talk, I just keep saying, let's check in with ourselves, because that person, your family's not here today, but you're here today. And the work has to start with you, because that's the only person you can change is how you're managing this in your perception. So, I would be fair to say, okay, you're going to leave here today and you're going to go out and change your family. You're going to leave here today and you might be able to go and change some of your behaviors with a lot of work and a lot of mindfulness. But so we have to start with that. We want to really ask ourselves, now this is, we want to ask ourselves and understand and be honest. And there's an example of this that I put in my slide here. Yes, the caregiver that may be a parentified child who really doesn't want any help. They say they do, but they don't want it. And so if you're that person who really doesn't want to have a lot of help caring for you in person, that's okay. It would be great to communicate that. For instance, if, and I may even, for instance, I can discourage help because it would mean giving up control of taking care of mom. So if I've got that power and I've got that sense of self-satisfaction, I may not want to give it up. I may not want to give it up with my husband or my wife. So I may not want to do that. And there's an example with that would be having two siblings. One is the primary caregiver, always running, kind of rule the roost as a child, and they're taking care of a parent. And the other sibling comes in and says, well, you know what? I'm bringing in, and this is really crazy, I'm bringing in toilet paper. I just thought you all could use some toilet paper. I just want to do something. As the other sibling receiving that can say, why on God's earth are you bringing me toilet paper? Don't you think I can manage this house? Do you really think I need you to bring in toilet paper? But if we get really curious about that, If you ask that person who's overreacting to the toilet paper, you may find that there's a sense of being demeaned from the position of being in control, and that person hasn't been doing enough, and then they come in with toilet paper and that's it. So we have to really get under, like, well, I see you're upset. Can you help me understand why this is upsetting to you? Rather than saying, for God's sakes, do you think I'm so bad I can't get toilet paper for my mother? So we really want to be open to that. We want to be open to our backstories, because the stories we tell ourselves about a situation, that's where our reactions are going to be. If I'm telling myself that my siblings are demeaning me, I'm more likely going to react with that demeaning. So working with ourselves, being open to our backstory, how do we see the situation? And we really do need to be moving forward. Also, we want to keep destructive impulses in check. And what does that mean? It just means don't just respond with anger and withdrawal or avoidance. If somebody comes and you're avoiding talking to them, at family gatherings, and you don't want to isolate yourself from family gatherings. You don't want to just be trying to shut yourself off. We want to notice the varying degrees of the family system and how they accept and understand the diagnosis. So we want to just keep ourselves in check. We don't want to be reactive. We want to be responsive. So that's our work, right? We want to work on that. And we really want to listen without judgment. We want to be able to express feedback without judgment. We want to try to stay calm. And there's also this concept of the pause with the calm. If you're paused and you remember, you're just pausing to take a moment and to look at this old cycle and see where you are in the old cycle. If I'm being reactive, then I am going to, I'm not going to pause. And then I may do something destructive. So I think that's really, really important. Also, the tone check. It's we want to stay calm, but if you've ever heard me speak before, you'll hear me say this. And it says, I always use this because I got a professor that used it. And he taught us early on that tone trumps content. So what does that mean? That means whatever tone the tone you use is going to be heard first rather than the words. So my brain, if I say pass the salt, that doesn't sound too confrontational. But if I say pass the salt, my brain's going to register that's aggressive. So it's going to go into the primitive part of my brain, and I'm going to be reactive. So if I'm talking to some of my family members in this family system, then I really want to modulate my voice. I want to notice my tone. And if I hear myself using a harsh tone and and I'm not saying you're not going to get irritated. I'm not saying you're not going to get frustrated. I'm just saying if you do it, own it and say, whoa, I just spoke really harshly. I can go back and repair that, but I want you to notice your tone, because I think that's really, really important in communication. I think it's one of the key pieces of good communication is tone.
I'm shoving my dirty sock in my mouth now.
Okay. And also, let's see, actively listening. I think we talked about that. Check your tone, actively listen. Of course, don't interrupt. We've been learning that in kindergarten. We're not supposed to interrupt people. We want to make sure that we let them speak, and we don't really want to be seen as critical or defensive. If somebody's telling me that my partner needs to be doing it, one of his children says, well, I think you need to do X, Y, and Z with my partner, then it's up to me, right, to be able to say, what is it you need, and let's have a conversation about this. But I really do want to listen. And also, one of the important parts is consider the relationship. Now, that's the same, it's very similar to don't ask the impossible of the person in the family system. So you have a family system and you have me who doesn't balance my checkbook. You would not want me handling my family's affairs, my husband's or anyone else's affairs or my brother's, because I just wouldn't do a good job. So don't give me a job that I'm no good. I don't even want to do. So you got to really understand, you got to consider the relationship, and then you've got to consider the relationship that the people had prior to the diagnosis. So if the relationship between your spouse, let's say you're in a step family and you've married in, and your relationship, the family's relationship with the father was rather strained, and you're in the relationship now as a new person. So the system and went like that because everybody knew that, dad was away. And then he gets sick. And so, but they've been trolling around dad. They know him. They've worked around it. They've adapted. And then enter a new person. Well, there's been so much chaos when a new person enters this family system because it's used to what it's used to. So if you're that new person entering the system, there's a chance that you, number one, are inheriting that family dynamic, and you're going to have to address it. And so you want to be paying attention to what was the relationship that that person had prior to the dementia diagnosis. So you want to see, how did he relate to his children, or she relate to the children, and what kind of mother was she with children or with her husband, or what was the relationship? So you really want to look at that. Another key thing is sharing information. Now, this is really important because keep in mind that the person with dementia can present differently at all times. It's not like I can come and visit you and you're going to tell me something, and then you're going to come and visit her, and then she's going to tell you something else. So we come out with two different perspectives of how she's doing. So in order to avoid the conflict that creates, and let me tell you, that creates conflict because it allows denial to be the weapon of choice and acceptance, to deny that anyone's really having memory loss, because I was there and they didn't show any memory loss. And then I come along and there's memory loss. And so we have two different realities. So we really want to share that. We also want to share if we have a treatment team, an assessment from someone is going to day treatment, or they have a doctor or a neurologist. Some families will actually write an email and give an assessment of the email, or they'll have a phone call and call on the family system. So sharing information is just so important, to share information, because that keeps miscommunication to a minimum, and it really cultivates a sense of the system working together, because now the family is a system, and systems have working parts. No system has just one. A system has working parts. So you're all part of that working system of family. So what we're doing today is talking, how do you all get on the same page to create the system that's interconnected, that's respectful, that is able to problem solve together and provide caregiving? Because we know if the balance of the system allows one individual to do all the work, is that a balanced system? It is not. The system is imbalanced. And if that person doesn't want to do that, or they feel put upon by doing that, then that's actually not going to work for you. The other one more is expand your social resources. And that means caregiving duties with the family needs to have more resources. One person cannot do this disease process. It's not a one-person job. And so you need to expand your resources, and that would be insight or support groups, whatever that you need, or Parkinson's support group. So you want to expand your resources to support you to be a part of that family and keep yourself, not your family, but you functioning in that system, so you bring your best self forward. And so I just wanted to end today that this is another thing that I like to say in my talks, which I think has a little bit of wisdom, and it's not mine. It's your job. It's not your job to improve anyone. It's not your job to convince anyone, and it's not your job to persuade anyone. It is only to inform someone and state your thoughts and your needs in a clear and precise manner. And then hopefully the person hearing you will be able to change the way they respond to you. But as I said, started out with this talk, that's not guaranteed. So all we can do is what we can do. And at the end of our lives, we have our integrity, and we know that we did the best we could do in a very difficult and challenging situation. So now I'm open. Thank you all. And I'm open to any questions anyone might have.
So we have a couple things online. So the first one's from Jan. She said, I never thought I would put my mother in memory care. I thought I would keep her at home. Now I realize that some people with dementia need the physical and psychological safety of memory care. However, well-meaning family members and friends who have not witnessed the symptoms, have not had access to the medical records, and in some cases don't want to know the diagnosis, everything you described has occurred. If people will not communicate with me and are disruptive at the community, and most concerning, tell my mother there is nothing wrong with her and she should be in her own home, what do I do? I obviously don't want to ban any visitors, especially family, but I see the harm to my mother whose anger and pain is triggered by these visits.
Well, that's a really hard one. It sounds like there's more than one family member doing that. Maybe Jen, if I understood that. So you have, you're trying to influence the system, and the system may have been established like that prior to your mother's diagnosis. So that would be really hard. And banning visitors, I mean, that is an option, but it's probably not one you want to resort to at the beginning. How are you able to talk to the siblings and say, come in, or even be in the visiting room with your siblings while you're with mom, so you can see, and they may be able to see how you're doing it and how you talk to her, because you may be using language that they don't know how to use, because if they haven't really thought and gotten informed about dementia. So those visits could be upsetting, and they could say, well, it's not true. And then you could also maybe, I don't know, you probably already did all this, but you could invite them to a family care meeting. And then you could have some of the professional staff, rather than you present this, would be having the professional staff say, yeah, sometimes Sally Joe, when you come in, that mom gets, Mrs. Smith gets dysregulated and she gets upset. So let's see. And so it may be better to invite professionals in to talk to the family, rather than you trying to change the system on your own. Remember, expand your resources, because you cannot do this by yourself, and you're only one person.
Our next one is from Terry. Can you summarize, based on your experience, the common key characteristics that family members demonstrate or must acquire in order for family units to work? Is conflict inevitable?
It's not inevitable. As I said earlier on, I mean, there are some families that are amazing, and they just take it in stride. They adapt, but they've always been families that adapt, and they have good communication. So, and there are people there that when they get a diagnosis, the whole family joins, and there's an intimacy and a tenderness that develops in the family system that may not have been there to begin with. And so that's one possibility. But conflict, no two people see reality as the same way. Mm-hmm. And especially if they're looking at someone they love. So, and I'm going to be really protective of that person, and you're going to be really protective. So we may not agree on the protection and how we're going to do this and how we're going to care for someone. So that's where we go back to communication, Terry. We go back to communicating. What is our expectations? How can we navigate this? And if it gets really serious conflict, you can invite professionals in. You can have someone come and sit and mediate in the family. Educate. Psychoeducation is so important with this diagnosis. You want to educate everybody that's in the system, because you can't educate one person. One person just can't come to support group, and everybody else out there doesn't, because then they come in, and that could even be a power differential that sets the family off of a steady pattern. So you want to keep the pattern as steady as possible.
Terry is wondering, would the communication be better by phone or via email?
Well, you have to consider my age. I would prefer conversations, because I think that the written word leaves a lot of interpretation. And remember, if tone trumps content, you're not going to hear my tone. Have you ever gotten a text message from somebody and you think it's so sharp because it says, okay, and you think, okay, oh gosh, what do they mean by that? So I think if you can have a phone conversation, I would very much encourage you, because you're leaving out the tone and the visuals and just the closeness, because you've got a distance when you use a phone, and this is a very intimate diagnosis, and you want to really connect as best you can in the most closest way you can. And so my long answer to that is use the phone.
I have to actually say, being a caregiver to my mom, and she's one of 10, so there's a lot of people in the family network. Caring Bridge is my saving grace.
Great.
And it's an online journal for caregivers, and you can give private access to just certain people, or you can open it public. But it really helped me be able to get the information across to a mass of people without having to make a gazillion phone calls. Because my other concern was, if I designated that one person to call and they called everyone else, some information's going to change by the time it gets to all the people. So that was my saving grace, and that might be an option for some people if they are dealing with a large network of people. So
yeah, and that is a great idea. Caring Bridge is really, really great. And family, if you can get the family together on a conference call, That oftentimes happens with people that live abroad. We work through the conference calls. So whatever works, but if there's an ability to do it in person, that would be the preference. But if it is like Melissa's saying, you're scattered and you've got 10 siblings, you're going to want to be concise, so you tell everybody everything exactly. Everyone has the same information.
And it's caregiving, what's
Caring bridge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, we've got a couple more here. Michelle, can you say more about how you navigate a conversation with adult children who don't agree about caregiving for a loved one with dementia? Like, what do you say if they don't agree with you?
Well, I'm assuming this is the spouse,
Yeah.
someone who's communicating with her children, and they're not agreeing with her. Well, in an ideal world, we'd be able to change that, right? But we have to work with what we have. I would be curious as to what's blocking the hearing. Well, what is it about what you're telling them that they're having difficulty taking in? I'd be really curious about that. I would ask the kids, what is it about me when I tell you that your dad can't do X, Y, and Z? So I would want to encourage conversations, and you may not convince them. I mean, you may have. I mean, life doesn't happen the way we want to. Some families go through this entire process and they're not a system, and that's really, really sad. And that's why I'm here today, just to say, is there a way we can prevent that from happening? But you do your best you can. And you communicate as best you can, and you hope the person receiving that is going to be able to take it in and respond appropriately.
Okay, and then the last we have up here right now from Delana, can you address more the situation of a couple living alone with one spouse having dementia requiring caregivers and coping mechanisms for the caregiving spouse? Adult children live nearby and are sometimes supportive and often critical of the care being provided.
Well, none of these questions are easy, right? Because, okay, so you're at home, you're caring, and then the children live by and they're criticizing the care that's being provided to the father. That's in that 8 that they found in research, and it's certainly been my experience in my practice. And because children can be critical of their parents, and they can feel like they're younger, they know more. And it's really hard sometimes for kids to allow their parents to have the ability to have independent decision making. Like I may not want the risk of having my father, or my kids may not want that. That's probably better. My kids wouldn't want me to be at home alone if my partner or husband or I lived with another child, to be left alone. But I may want to have that right and dignity to make that decision. And we don't know if this couple has had this conversation before his dementia advanced, like, you take care of me as long as you can here. So we would need to walk very gently into that and find out what was the conversation with them together, and what is it that you're seeing that could be dangerous to the person with dementia? Are they not getting showered? Is there anything that as a safety risk for that person? Now, then you've got a whole different issue if it is a safety complaint, but it may be a lifestyle preference. Maybe the spouse doesn't care that the husband isn't showering and changing his shirt, and that bothers you more than her. It doesn't bother him. So what is it that you're really needing your family to do differently that would help you feel more comfortable with the caregiving? And we want to be curious about that. And the only way we can figure that out is to ask questions and talk about it. And then you can make your plan. How realistic is it? If it's really bad and you feel like there's danger, then you could call Adult Protective Services. There's things you could do. You could look at community resources. So it would depend on the situation.
And I think to know, a lot of people, when they hear Adult Protective Services, panic and think, oh no, we're in trouble. They are a great resource. If you're really struggling and need to bring a third party in because of family dynamics, they are great, because then you're not the bad guy. So utilize it as a tool, not as you're in trouble. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions in here?
I'm going to ask a hard one.
Yeah.
So you know that stay calm part? How do you achieve that?
Well, that's a hard one. I mean, that is hard. It's hard for everyone to stay calm. So, in an ideal world, I can't predict that, but is if you're finding yourself getting anxious. Now, most of us know when you start to get anxious. We'll either start breathing a little heavy or we get tension in our shoulders. So we're not calm. We kind of know our body's getting into a fight or flight response. We're getting anxious. So that's the moment that in order to stay calm, that you would use the pause. You would say, oh, I'm checking in my body, and my body says I'm really getting tense because so-and-so is saying this. You may want at that moment notice that you're not calm and take a break. You may just step out for a moment. You may say, I really want to hear what you're saying. It's really important to me, but I just need a little break. I'm going to go to the bathroom. So then you can go in there and take some deep breaths. Then you can kind of calm your body down. You can flip off that alarm switch, and then you can come back and try to be calm. But now that's in an ideal world. That is not when the person you're caring for is yelling and screaming at you and saying things that hurt your feelings. And then you're finding yourself getting all wrapped up. If you're doing that and you're in the process of something, we need to just be able to take breath. Breath is our friend. And we need to pause it and breathe it. And sometimes it can turn off the alarm system, the parasympathetic, and will give us parasympathetic responses. But we're not always going to be calm. That's an ideal world. We all get upset about something, and it's just what we do with it.
So if any of you are local and you haven't signed up, we have a boot camp on April 20th on Saturday. And we actually have Loretta coming, who actually does Lego therapy with caregivers as another tool in your pocket on how to manage those moments using Legos. And she had a great story she shared with me. She had a woman that was in a group that she did, and her husband would get up at night and pace and pace and pace, and it drove her nuts, and she couldn't sleep. And so she was up and getting angry. She went to the class, learned this technique, and the next night got up, put the Legos on the table. She was doing it. He walks through, what are you doing? She goes, I'm just playing with Legos. He walked 2 more times. He goes, okay, I'm ready for bed. So there was no argument, no frustration. And so it was just another tool in your bag. So if you haven't signed up and you want to go, we are also offering respite care if you need that. I just need to know by Friday. So we have 6 spots open, and I'd love to get them filled because she is phenomenal. We also have Dr. Calderay, one of her peers, coming to talk about medications for behaviors, including CBD, because it conveniently is 420. So I planned that accordingly. So those are some really important topics. So we'd love to have those other seats filled. And I think it'll be some good tools to help.
Yeah.
And can I just ask, what's respite care?
Respite means the person with the diagnosis will go over to the day center. We're going to have people do some activities with them while you're here, so they don't have to be home alone.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you
much.
all. And please feel free. We do these talks every month. Next month, we're going to talk about working with different cultures. We'll take having someone with dementia from the Alzheimer's Association, the state level. They're going to come in and talk about that, which is really important because different cultures need different things as we go through this journey. If you're looking for any other support groups, memory cafes, education, please go on insightmcc.org/events. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us as well. But thank you, Rebecca, so much. We truly appreciate this. And this has been recorded. It will be posted probably in about a week on our webinar, so you can keep an eye out if you want to watch it again.
Thank you.